All right, the title of the book. All right, so in this case, it appears to be Adulterae, the Gospel of John, and the Literacy of Jesus. Do we need to do anything special with that? Anything special with the title?
Is it italicized?
It's italicized, right? So titles of books are italicized. Articles are put in quotation marks. All right, so the Pericope Adulterae, the Gospel of John, and Literacy of Jesus in italics. What comes next? All right, so in parentheses, you have the series, in this case, NPTSD. What other information? What comes after the series? All right, the volume number, in this case 38, followed by a semicolon, and then after that comes what was that?
The pages yet?
No. Not quite needing the pages yet. Before the publisher, the publication city. So the publication city, in this case Leiden, followed by a colon, and then the publisher, Brill, followed by a comma, and then the date, 2009. You close your parentheses. In this case, we're citing page 100, so comma 100, and a period. Now, again, some of this information you don't need to know. How many pages it is unnecessary. Right? That includes bibliographic references is unnecessary. Now, in this case, it's a page-to-page electronic book, meaning that if you look up page 100 in a print book, it's going to be the same as page 100 in an electronic book. So do we need to make any sort of notation that this is an electronic book you looked at? As long as it is page-to-page, you don't need that. If you're using a Kindle or Nook or something like that where there's not the equivalent, then you would know that you're using an electronic edition. All right, so it should look something like this. Now, it's a little bit tricky about this one, so hopefully you won't run into this, but if you have any foreign language words in your title, all of the English words are italicized, any foreign language words are in regular print. Here's the reason for that. Normally, when you would write a sentence and include those words, you should italicize those words, in this case, Latin. Right? Pericope Adulterae is Latin. And so if you were writing this in a sentence, you would put Pericope Adulterae in italics. But since the title of the book is in italics, foreign words are regular font. Right. Probably not something you're going to run into maybe for your papers, but just one of those things to keep in the back of your mind. If it does show up, I'm not necessarily going to dock you points if you have everything italicized, but just one of those things to kind of keep in mind. Related to that, if you have an article title that has quotation marks in it, right, then those quotation marks are single quotation marks, and the entire journal, the entire article title is in double quotation marks. Right? So let's say this is an article title and Pericope Adulterae is in quotation marks instead of being italicized. So you put double quotation marks at the beginning, single quotation marks around your phrase, Pericope Adulterae, and then the double quotation marks at the end. Again, I'm not necessarily going to take off a whole lot for that. It's one of those rules that it's part of grammar that you might have learned at one time but have forgotten. It happens. But if you can remember that, try to remember if there's a, for example, some of you are doing baptism for the dead, and so baptism for the dead might appear in quotation marks in the title of your article. Or if you're doing, I don't think anybody's doing 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, but the man of sin. Right? That there might be phrases like that will appear in quotation marks in your journal article titles. You would use single quotation marks in that case. What will we need to do to change this from a note citation to a bibliographic citation? What are some of the changes we need to make?
Indentation to start with.
All right, change the indentation. So this one comes at the end. Everything after goes in. All right, so the hanging indent. What else do you need to change?
The order of names.
All right, the order of the names. So Keith, comma, Chris, followed by the period. Then the title, all right, as it appears, followed by the period. The name of the series, comma, 38, followed by a period. You don't use the parentheses here. And then you need the page numbers you cited. All right. For bibliographic citation of the book, you do not need the page numbers you cited in your bibliography. All right. You've cited them in your paper. You don't need them in the bibliography. Questions? Is it starting to, I'm not going to say it makes sense, because it probably doesn't make sense, which is a lot of these things. Why do it this way? Well, that's just the way they do it. But are you starting to get a feel for this, at least some of these general ones that you feel, okay, I kind of have a better idea of what I'm doing? This means yes. Okay, I'm seeing some of this, so that's good. All right. Certainly, with the amount of time we have still between now and the paper, if, as you're looking at your sources, you want to write them out or type them up in a Word document or an email and send them to me and say, could you help me make sure these are right? I'd be willing to do that. All right? So if you want to, and again, if it's just like one or two so you can get the pattern down, I'm willing to do that. So whatever I can do to help you, try to get this down for your paper, since that will be a part of the grade. And then it will be on the final. Small part of the final. Right? Not a big, huge part of the final, but there will be things like this on the final. Whatever I can do to help you with this, please let me know. Let's move on today into and so there's what the bibliography would look like. We'll move on today into a central part of the paper. Up to this point, we've been focusing on preparing to write the paper. We've been focusing on gathering information for you to write the paper. One of the major things that should be a part of your paper, any paper that you write, is an argument. There should be some sort of claim that you're making. Particularly, it should be evidenced in what's often referred to as a thesis statement. A sentence, maybe two, that lays out at the beginning of your paper what you are going to be claiming. Now again, most of the passages that you have selected, even those that some of you have selected on your own, have something controversial about them, meaning that there is usually two or more options about what that passage means. So what I'm hoping to see in your paper is your decision, based on what you've looked at, as to what is the appropriate either meaning of the text, or if it's a case of a manuscript variance like Mark 16, whether it belongs there or doesn't. I'm not as concerned about the specific argument. I mean, you and I might end up disagreeing about, for example, like if you're doing Mark 16, and you decide it doesn't belong there. I might say, well, I think it belongs there, or it might be vice versa. I'm not going to dock you points for you taking a different position than what I'm going to take. But what I want to see is you taking a position. You have to make a determination as to what that passage means, or whether it belongs in that book, or whatever particular issue is related to your passage. The central claim of your research paper is supposed to be related to your research question. You remember back a couple of classes ago, we talked about this question or the problem that guides your research. Right? I am studying blank so that I can find out whatever. Right? I'm looking at this passage in order to find out what it means. Well, your claim, your thesis statement, your argument should be what you believe it means. Additionally, what you're going to present is not just your claim, but your evidence. And so the claim and the evidence is your argument. Now the argument here, when we think of argument most of the time, we think of some sort of heated conflict between two parties. Now, certainly in some cases, some of these issues that you're studying has led to heated conflict between people. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, as the book The Craft of Research refers to it, as a thoughtful conversation. Right? You're engaging in conversation with scholarly sources, with the text. Now, it's not just about your opinions. Essentially, yes, part of the claim is your opinion, but that opinion should be based on evidence. Why you claim that or why you came to that conclusion. In constructing that part of your paper, you need to keep in mind that there are people who will, now real or imagined, who will contradict everything you say. So you have to think about, how do I answer those people? And it's through that, making a claim, marshaling your evidence, addressing contradictory opinions or views, that is what's going to make your research paper a very strong one. Right, so you have to think about objections, alternatives, how other people might address the particular question you're looking at. Essentially, there are 4 parts to an argument. The first part of the argument is the main claim. What is it you are claiming in your paper about the passage you're looking at, about a specific view on Scripture, if you're talking about another research paper? What is your claim? That's part of the argument. Another part of the argument is the evidence. What is the evidence that supports your claim? Because essentially your argument is, based on this evidence, I've made this claim. Now, your argument is more than just your claim and your evidence. In addition, you must also have what is frequently called a warrant. Now, a warrant can be understood and not necessarily expressed, but sometimes you do need to express it. So, what's a warrant? A warrant refers to a general principle that shows why your evidence relates to your claim. Why does this evidence show what you are claiming? And so the warrant is kind of the bridge between evidence and claim. And it shows how those two are brought together. Fourthly, often, though not always, a part of the argument includes any sort of qualifications on the claim or the evidence you are using. And so it might be a situation where you would say, given certain situations, this is the case. Right? In other situations, it might be something different. Right? So you're qualifying. Right? Based on this evidence that is available, I've come to this conclusion. Right? But there's a possibility of additional evidence being discovered. Now, sometimes you might not need any sort of qualifications, but sometimes you will. And if you do, that would be a part of your argument. Right? That it's only in this set of circumstances that my argument is valid. or it's only when you look at the evidence in this way. The Craft of Research book I've mentioned already presents the ideas behind this as a conversation. Thinking about it as a conversation might help understand how these different parts of the argument work together. So here we have a case of a conversation, a fictitious conversation, occurring between student A and student B related to the beginning of a semester and how a semester is going to go. So A asks B, right, how do you think you'll do this semester? B makes a claim. I think I'll do better than last. Right? So I think I'm going to do better than this semester than the last semester. Well, why do you think that? Well, B's response, I'm finally taking courses in my major. Right? So he made a claim. I'm going to do better this semester than I did last semester. Why? Well, I'm taking courses in my major. Well, why does that make a difference? I do better when I take courses that interest me. This is the warrant. This is how the taking courses in my major relates to I'm going to do better this semester. Because this is the principle that connects those two pieces. Right? Because I'm going to do better than this semester than last semester, and I'm taking courses in my major don't necessarily seem to fit together until we understand that for student B, right, when courses interest me, I do better in them. Therefore, I'm going to do better this semester than last semester. So you see how those two, or those three pieces work together, the evidence, the claim, and the warrant. It goes on to getting into some counter evidence, responses, concessions, qualifications. And well, what about that statistics course you have to take? All right, suggesting that's counter evidence. All right. Well, I know I'm calculus, but statistics is easier. Now I have a tutor who can explain things better than my teachers do. All right, so a response to that evidence. And so while we see this on a kind of conversational scale, essentially that's what you need to think through in developing your argument. That doesn't mean you have to sit down and have a conversation with yourself and kind of say, like the anti-you, right? It's going to kind of contradict everything you said. Get an 8-year-old. Because that's essentially what 8-year-olds do. I know that now because I have an 8-year-old. And counter everything that you say, right? Well, no, but, all right. So you don't have to think of it like that, but you don't actually have to have an out-loud conversation. But this is kind of the way you think through producing an argument, like you would with a conversation. Essentially, when you think about it, there are certain things that readers of your paper are looking for. Now, often, in this case, the primary reader for your paper is going to be a professor. You might show your parents, friends, there are a variety of people you might show it to, but in most cases, when we do papers for classes, we don't, we're looking for the professor, and the professor is the only one that reads it. But essentially, people that read research papers are looking for a couple of things. They want to know what your claim is. They want to know what your evidence is. They want to know why your evidence supports your claim. They want to know any sort of qualifications. How certain are you about this? All right. Well, I'm fairly certain that this is the case, or I'm significantly certain. And so those are some things to remember. It's not just taking your reader on a grand tour of the plethora of different opinions and the lovely scenery of your particular topic. No, you're making a claim. Right? You're taking a position. And in taking that position, you are marshaling your evidence, you're demonstrating your warrants, and all of that. Here's another example that might help with thinking through the relationship between these pieces. Right? So, having a conversation with someone, hey, I think you need to be checked for diabetes. It's a claim. Checked for diabetes? What? Why do I need to be checked for diabetes? Well, because your glucometer reading, right, which measures your blood glucose, is 200. Well, so what's the warrant? A reading over 120 is a good sign that someone may have diabetes. Right? So this is how it relates to the claim. You should be checked for diabetes. The evidence you should be checked for diabetes is your glucometer reading, and the way those two relate is this principle of a reading over 120. Unless, right, qualification, unless that person has just eaten something sugar.